Hey everybody, and welcome to the Pop Song Professor YouTube channel. We have a really exciting adventure today. You probably noticed I'm kind of in between studios right now. This is just a wonderful Airbnb somewhere in the middle of Michigan, but we are going to get back to it, potentially here. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But today we have something very exciting going on. We're going to talk to Adam Met. Well, I should say Dr. Adam Met of the band AJR. He's a climate advocate with his organization Planet Reimagined, a professor at Columbia, and the author of a new book, Amplify, How to Use the Power of Connection to Engage, Take Action, and Build a Better World. You probably put a lot of work into this book just based, completely on how long the title is. That is a lot to cover. Is there, what did I miss? What else should we know about you, Adam?
You hit a lot of it, but thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk all things music, activism, touring, creating music, everything that you want to discuss.
Would it be okay if we referred to you as Dr. AJR? Is that within the realm of... No, I'm just kidding. We won't do that. I'm assuming you're the only doctorate in the band at this point.
That is true. That is true. For now.
Let's talk more about your role with the band. I know you play bass. And you're talking a lot about fan base building and connecting with audiences and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit more about, kind of what you do behind the scenes with AJR.
Absolutely. So AJR, we've been a band for about 18 years now, and it's myself and my two brothers. So we grew up loving music. We grew up in a small apartment in New York City, and we actually got our start street performing. And we would go down to Washington Square Park, which, if you know the New York area, it's kind of an iconic park. There's a big arch there, there's a big fountain, and we would play music on the street. And that was honestly the hardest thing we've ever done. Because when people are just walking by on the street, they're not there to see you. You have to stop them. You have to do something that's so eye-catching and interesting to get them excited about what you're doing. So we did that for quite a long time. And over those years, we realized each of us have very different skill sets. And each of us have very different things that we like to focus on. So my other two brothers, Ryan and Jack, they really focus on the songwriting piece of it. Ryan is really focused on designing the show. Ryan's the producer. Jack's really great at writing melodies. And for me, my area of focus really is on how do we create a cohesive brand? How do we do the marketing and the strategy and the fan building and the album campaigns and the touring campaigns, down to what city should we be going to? How are we going to do a radio campaign? What do our deals look like? So it was kind of lucky that each of us have different things that we're excited about, because it allowed us kind of not to butt heads in that process, and we all trusted each other to do our own roles in the band. And then we came together to do these live shows.
Hey, that's pretty awesome. Good division of labor there. If somebody, because on our channel we have a lot of people who want to be songwriters who watch. If somebody reads Amplify, will they be able to emulate your success with no other resources?
With no other resources, you might need one or two other resources. But one of the funny things about songwriting is that so much of it is storytelling, and there are so many different ways, obviously, to tell stories. And there's a whole storytelling chapter in Amplify, and some of the stories there are about AJR songs, how they came together. Some of them are about other bands, how they developed their own story in the narrative so people could connect to them as an artist. But really everything you're doing as an artist is storytelling in different ways. Obviously, with the growth of social media over the last decade or so, what you're putting out there is this broad narrative that gets specific with different posts, but you're really creating a story for yourself that fans either will relate to or not relate to. And more, it's just as much about this kind of broader brand that you're creating as the individual songs.
Now, so many jumping off points from here, but I did want to highlight chapter 3 because I think that, of any of the chapters in the book, my fans might be the most excited about that. It's called Waxing Lyrical, I think. Hopefully that's okay to spoil.
Of course. Sure.
But, just tell us a little bit about chapter 3, why, somebody who's really into AJR and music and fan building, why they might want to read chapter 3.
So this idea of storytelling kind of in this chapter starts with Phil Ochs and Bob Dylan. And if you haven't heard of Phil Ochs, he was really an artist that focused on protest songs and protest music. And he wrote a lot of songs that were really focused on very specific storytelling, and it got the audience angry. And in that kind of moment of protesting for the Vietnam War, anger was the thing that got people out there and protesting. Now, the songs were very provocative. He has a song called Here's to the State of Mississippi, and that song specifically says, here it goes through kind of here's to the government, here's to the people, here's to the churches, here's to the schools, and it kind of lists all of the issues that are going on in Mississippi. And then at the end of each chorus, it says, Mississippi, find yourself another country to be part of. Every single chorus. Yeah, so Phil Oakes says, Mississippi, go find yourself another country to be part of. And those are biting words at that moment, because even, long after the Civil War, there was, the civil rights movement, and it was a really kind of biting time for people. And we start there in the book, and we go all the way through modern times when we talk about stories. When we're telling stories, one of the key things is that the audience needs to be ready for the story just as much as the story might need to be told. So from those artists, we talk about all the way up to the creation of Hamilton, the Broadway show. Mm-hmm. And that took a long time to create. It took over a decade to create. And when it was first being developed, it actually wasn't the right time in US history for an audience to actually care about the issues. We were just coming out of the financial crisis in 2008, and people weren't really ready for it. And actually, Lin-Manuel Miranda went to the White House. He performed a couple of songs from Hamilton, and people thought it was a joke at that time. And a handful of years later, actually in that time, there's a clip from Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, of him actually making fun of Lin-Manuel Miranda and making fun of Hamilton. But a handful of years later, the time had changed. We'd recovered from the recession. It was just a different moment in US history. And it was actually the right moment to hear about people of color representing our founding fathers and rapping about that story. And so we see that in music, whether you're talking about, whether we should be going to war or not, or talking about our history, if the audience is not primed for it, then it's not going to be something that's resonant with them.
Gotcha. And I love the emphasis on storytelling there. And that kind of brings up this really big question I wanted to ask you. If you're in charge of managing the brand for AJR, and you talk a lot about in this book about, creating a movement, and movements come down a lot of times, the key cornerstone of both those and bands in the digital era in particular is that sort of central brand. Like, who are we? What are we about? What do we do? I think that managing a brand must be a little bit extra difficult when we're dealing with something like art. And the kind of art that AJR creates is so focused on relatability and kind of living in the real world and understanding where your audience is. At least that's my interpretation of a lot of what I've listened to from you guys. So for you, as somebody who is interested in social movements and making the world a better place, managing brands, how do you balance authenticity with artistic integrity, with brand management, with hitting metrics that go into making a movement? Like, there's 4 very different things there, and you don't have to remember them all, but like the basic gist of this is like, how do we make things happen and get people to do things that, will help us make the world a better place while also creating art? Like, what's that all about?
It's a great question, because a lot of people want to be creating art for the sake of creating art, right? Art should be its own thing. That is, whether it's a commentary on society or just because you feel some sort of emotion, that's how you create your art. At the same time, when you're building a brand of a band or a solo artist or anything else, there are a lot of other objectives, right? One of the things that I think about is this authenticity of the music itself leading to how we create that brand. So I'll give you a couple of examples. A lot of artists, and not that there's anything wrong with this, but a lot of artists, they really focus on their look, and whether that's the clothing that they wear or their hair or the makeup that they wear. Before every show, every interview, everything, they spend hours in hair and makeup and styling. For us, we don't take that approach. We pulled a wrinkled t-shirt out of our suitcase before we put it on and go on stage, because that's who we are as people. Everything we do, whether it's in the songwriting or how we develop this brand or the way we talk on social media, is just honest and us. And we feel that that's one of the reasons why fans are connecting to us. And fans are connecting to us because of the music. And I'll give you another example. So on social media, on Instagram in particular, the band has about 1 million followers, right? That is a really sizable number. But on our last tour, over 500,000 people came out in the US to see us on tour, which means that we have a lot more than 1 million fans. There are a lot of people who are here because they care about the music and not necessarily about the way we look or the way we dress or all of these other pieces of it. And so the brand that we've developed is about the music being the front and center because we don't focus on all of these other things. And we're fine with that. That was our goal from the beginning, that as we're thinking about this from zero, let's write music, let's perform music, let's develop a stage show that is about the art in and of itself, rather than how can we create all of these other things around the art to kind of potentially take away from the focus of it being on the art. And I think that's why our fans have connected so much with the lyrics, with the music. We see the lyrics tattooed across fans' arms and legs when they come to shows. They use it as their quotes in their yearbooks. Lyrics and the stories that we write are the things that I feel like connect to people. So the brand is just an extension of that, rather than, okay, here's the music, and how do we design a brand that gets the most attention, but also stays true to the music. It's one is just an extension of the other.
You've set a really solid foundation with the music itself, made it about the music, and then it sounds to me like a lot like you guys would say that the brand sort of flows naturally from what you've already created at the center there.
Absolutely.
Is there an extent, especially when you're talking about creating movements and when it's creating a movement around an artistic thing, is there a point at which you would say that creating and managing a brand almost becomes an artistically creative experience itself? I think it's very easy to look at social media management, which is what a lot of people think of when you think of brand management, even though it's just a small part. But, to look at it as KPIs and metrics and, to an extent pretty soulless. But do you think there's an artistic element to, maybe your role specifically with the band then?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a creative element. I think that I'll give you a couple of different examples. One of the most creative things that we think about is how to give fans ownership over us as a band. And what I mean by that is we are kind of the music industry's best kept secret. We sell thousands of tickets to every show, but at the same time, we're not on the cover of Rolling Stone. One of the ways that happened is that we were underground for a really long time. We were independent. We didn't sign a label deal for quite a few years. And that kind of gave fans this ownership over us. And so we leaned into that. And what I mean by that is we developed creative strategies in order to give them ownership. So one of our album covers a couple of albums ago, we decided to do this campaign where we cut it up into, 24 different jigsaw puzzle pieces. And we sent each piece out to a different area of our social media on Twitter, on Instagram, on our text list, on our email list. And the fans were able to actually put together that art themselves without us, and they were the first ones to post it. That gave them ownership over the project, over that album, and they were much more excited to share about it because they created it. They created the art. And so these kinds of creative strategies that you don't normally think of actually help to build a fan base. Now, in terms of the KPIs, one of the things that we think a lot about is super fans. And the music industry is just really catching on now to the value of super fans. If you can really deeply engage with a core set of fans, that's the most powerful tool you have. It is way stronger to have those fans that then help you evangelize and build a larger fan base than it is to have a much larger number of really shallow fans that will listen to half a song on Spotify and then move on to the next thing. A lot of the playlist algorithms on Spotify incentivize shallow fans, but investing in super fans will give artists longevity. It'll have fans participating in the music, of course, but then the live show, the merchandise, the fan club, the online experiences, the Discord groups, the social media, whatever it is. It's that deeper engagement. And so now record labels have realized, okay, record labels are in the business of making money. The way that they can make money is by building up that group of super fans, because they're the ones that are going to buy every color of the vinyl release that you do, which is great. But at the same time, from the beginning, ensuring you're prioritizing those super fans and making sure you're keeping track of who they are, paying them special attention. That is probably the most important thing that we did for building a fan base that's going to listen to music, buy merchandise, come out to shows, stay engaged over the long run.
I think that is fascinating, particularly because with AJR, so much of the power that you guys have with your fans is lyrically based. I mean, even the way you mix your songs, the voice is made very, very clear to be heard, so that like you're not going to listen to 99% of AJR songs and get the lyrics wrong. Like you might mishear like blank space from Taylor Swift and think it's Starbucks Lovers, right? Like I don't think that's ever happened to me listening to an AJR song because you guys make the lyrics very clear, they're very personal. What role do you think for you guys the kind of lyrics that you write plays in building those super fans?
Yeah. So Ryan and Jack write the lyrics, but there's a lot that we think about in terms of the stories. The lyrics live in this space where specificity is key, but also generalities are key. And so there's this fine line between telling really specific stories and making them broad enough that people can relate to them and apply them in their own lives. So we have songs like Weak. Weak is one of our biggest songs. I'm weak, what's wrong with that? It's a broad concept, but then the verses dive deeper into what those stories are. And so people have been able to take the choruses, apply them to stories in their own life. 100 Bad Days is another great example. We've had so many fans reach out and say, I have had 100 bad days. This is my story that happened. And they get to imprint their own lives on it. That is key for our songwriting. We can be so specific. Our song Bang talks about having quinoa in the fridge. That might not be the most relatable concept, but it is true. And at the same time, the idea of kind of facing adulthood is broad enough that people in their teens, their 20s, their 30s are able to embrace it and hold it close to them. So finding that balance between specificity and generalities have been really key to our work.
That is fascinating. I feel like we could do a whole hour-long conversation just about specificity versus generality and the role that that plays in pop music. Just to bring it back to Amplify for a minute here, you obviously care a ton about social change and climate advocacy and a lot of different things that you've looked into. Your PhD, I think, was in international human rights. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. What kind of activities in that vein or what kind of goals are you guys in the band trying to accomplish as far as social causes go at this point? Yeah. Things that, maybe we should know about.
Absolutely. So one of the really interesting things that we did on our last tour, at every stop of our last tour, we had an advocacy set up. And through my nonprofit, Planet Reimagined, we have a project at the nonprofit called Amplify. I know it gets very confusing because I stole the title from my nonprofit because I thought it was so good. But this project, we actually did a huge amount of research. And as somebody who has a PhD also, you'll understand this kind of thought process. What we did is we polled thousands and thousands of fans. We worked with Ticketmaster in order to do this. And we asked them lots of questions about how they were willing to participate in advocacy, where in the concert venue, what they wanted the artist to talk about, how they wanted the artist to speak, what they were willing to do after, etc. We took all this data and we built it out at a handful of different shows. We did a 1975 concert, we did Jingle Balls, we did a bunch of different shows, and then we did it on our tour. On our tour, at each stop, we had a local advocacy issue around climate that fans can come and take action in. Now, of all the fans that came to the show, 15% of them ended up taking action on the concourse, which is actually a huge percentage of people that walk through the door. This was everything from, at the simplest level, registering to vote, but all the way through signing petitions. We had the ability for people to call their members of Congress on site. We gave them a pre-written script asking their member of Congress to vote a certain way on a certain issue. And just to give you an example, in Phoenix, it was 109 degrees out the day that we were there. We had fans signing a petition to try and get FEMA to designate extreme heat as an emergency to open more funding for Phoenix. Every single city had its own local issue that made sense for them. And in the election in 2024, even if a lot of these states ended up going one way or another, in 7 of the states that we prioritized, all of these people ended up voting for the climate issue, which we were really excited about, because it goes to show that when you're not focused on a certain political candidate, but when you're focused on the issue itself and how it's going to impact people in their own community, that you really get people excited. So we did that on our tour, and now we're expanding to do that on other tours and outside the US as well, because when you can find people in a time when they're excited. And one of my favorite ideas behind this is there's a sociologist named Durkheim, and he came up with this idea of collective effervescence. And he wrote about it in a religious context, but collective effervescence is the idea that when you have people in a group and they're really excited about something, you can actually capture that energy and use it for something else. So we basically took the collective effervescence that was happening at our shows and other shows and moved that energy towards people taking action for climate and a bunch of other issues.
Fascinating concept there. Brings up another question. You know, there's this concept of like building up an emotional bank account with something, right? With somebody, you do something nice for them, you compliment them. I don't know that it's entirely research backed, but you know, anecdotally, like eventually you might, you know, say something mean or you might ask for help, and you're kind of drawing on that. When it comes to building a movement and, you know, exactly what you're talking about, where you have this effervescence and you're kind of redirecting it towards somewhere else, that in some kind of a way is drawing on that and asking people to do something. How do you go about building up the effervescence to be able to draw on in the first place, so that people don't feel like they're being asked to do too much, or like they're, you know, this is what I came for. I came here just to listen to some songs. You know, what does that come down to?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the artist, how they talk to their fans in the music and how they talk to their fans outside of the music. So with us, for example, there have been many references to social issues in a lot of our songs. Our song Inertia on our most recent album, there's a line, I was going to save the planet, but today I've got plans, which is a real thing that people think about. They want to participate, but they're all so busy. We have songs that talk about being gay. We have songs that talk about having a female president, about immigration, about all of these different issues, right? And so when you speak to your fans using the music as a tool, then they start to see, okay, this band cares about all of these different issues. It makes me want to think about, okay, what is my position in them, right? And so that's one piece of it. And then when you replicate that on social media, when you're talking to your fans saying, you know, during COVID, we did a fundraiser in order to try and help relieve people of medical debt. We worked with this organization that ended up being a multiplier, and we ended up alleviating about $7.5 million worth of medical debt for people in districts where our fans lived, in zip codes where our fans lived, which was a huge campaign. Our fans participated, we participated, it was great. But it also shows that we actually care. And we're not doing it just to be performative. We actually care. And there are some artists that might, you know, pick an issue and say, you know, oh, I need an issue. I need something to care about. And they pick something. But
is there any artist you'd like to call out?
No.
I'm just kidding.
But if you're not being authentic with it, if you're not keeping up the messaging, if it's not part of your, you know, everything that you're doing holistically, fans can see through that. They know when you're BSing. And so the authenticity, the fact that it lives across the music and our social messaging, and we're putting our money where our mouth is, that's been key to engaging fans in this advocacy.
A lot of what I'm picking up from here, authenticity, sincerity, actually caring, you know, obviously the relatability, you build those relationships with your fans, and so they're more likely to want to listen to you when you have, you know, an issue that you want them to be aware of or to think about. But also sounds like consistency and setting clear expectations. Nobody's going to an AJR concert and then they're surprised by what you're singing about, right? Like, you're very consistent throughout. And I think a lot of that probably is credit to you and to your brothers, because they're writing the lyrics, right? But that's credit to you for helping maintain and envision a consistent brand across it, which I'm guessing is probably something that you talk about in Amplify. But just to, you know, to get to a kind of a wrap up point here with Amplify, you know, there's a lot of audience building books out there. I think ever since 2000, we've thought a lot about building followings on social media. We've thought about global impact and causes and bringing people together in ways that we never could have before, because we were just, you know, we weren't in the digital era where so much is possible. What elements do you feel like Amplify, what unique or new elements do you think Amplify brings to this conversation?
Yeah, That's a great question. So the first section of the book is about people and individuals. And the first chapter really is about how do you envision the world that you want to see? And the second chapter is what role can you play in it? And this, I borrow a lot of different strategies from the music industry and from music. But when I travel around, the number one question I get is, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how my skill set fits into making the world a better place. And so basically, I go through all of these different types of skill sets, all of these different types of roles. And through that chapter, especially in chapter 2, you can kind of figure out a way for you to participate. So the first part of the book is figuring out how you can participate. The second kind of big section in the book is all of these strategies in order to take what you're doing participating, whether it's an organization or a movement or a campaign, and make it more creative, make it more outside the box, make it more useful for building something bigger. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's look at how an artist, AJR and many others, would be creative about building a fan base. What are movements not doing that the music industry is doing that we can take from one and apply to the other? So gamification is a really interesting one. Gamification, there's a whole chapter called Press Play. And in that chapter, we look at everything from how Pokemon Go was developed to what 21 Pilots does with building their lore, to Taylor Swift, to us, the puzzle example that I talked to you about before. There's so many different ways to gamify, and each of those are a different approach. 21 Pilots is building a world for their fans to live in. Taylor Swift is putting people in competition with each other. Us is making fans collaborate with each other. There are all of these different strategies, and when you get down to, okay, yeah, they're all games, but what are you getting the fans to do? Each of those supply a different strategy for how to build this kind of collective, how to build connection. And that's really what movements need. So whether it's building a place for the fans to interact with each other, whether it's putting them in competition, in collaboration, Pokemon Go takes people out of their homes and puts them into a live space, into the real world. And maybe it's that your movement needs. There are all these concrete things that we take from music and apply to movements that will just make movements so much stronger and so much more interesting for people to get engaged.
I think that's awesome. Well, I know we're kind of coming close on time here. So if people are interested in learning more about Amplify or ordering it, where should we go find this book so that we can read it?
Everywhere that you get your books, you can pre-order Amplify now. It comes out June 3rd. And I don't think I've told anyone this yet, but I'll be going on a book tour, and I will be hitting a lot of cities across the United States talking about different strategies within Amplify, and I'll have all of these different guests. The book has so many interviews with different artists and comedians and journalists and academics in order to try and create a system for people to really build something that makes our planet a better place to live.
I love it. Thanks so much for taking the time, Adam. Really appreciate you, all that you do, both in the context of the climate, the context of the band. And I mean, you sound very busy. I'm sure there's plenty of other things you're doing that are indirectly benefiting me in some way. So just to kind of as a catch-all, thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you for your time. This was great.
Absolutely. You have a great one.